Welcome to the Rockin Wellness Podcast, the show that takes you on a voyage to better health, wellness, and happiness that will rock your world. With me, R.J.O, your host, your coach, and your biggest fan. Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Rockin Wellness Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, R.J.O, author of A Beginner's Guide to Going Meatless, health coach, and yoga instructor. Many people today are suffering with poor health and a lack of wellness, so it is my mission with this podcast to share my 20 plus years of experience and knowledge in the health and wellness industry to help you achieve the health, the wellness, and the life you desire. In today's podcast, we will be discussing nutrition, specifically reviewing macronutrients, why they're important, and how much you need. The topic of nutrition is one that's often confusing for people to understand, especially since there are numerous professionals who all have their own opinions, and of course, all the latest fads on what's the best way to eat. However, regardless of the latest fad or what will help you lose weight the fastest, the one thing we can't deny is science and how nutrition really works in the body. Anyone who has ever worked with me knows that I am not a fan of counting calories or macronutrients because I believe it's important to eat whole food nutrition, which will just automatically give you what you need. Learn how to eat intuitively by listening to how the body feels and adjusting the diet through trial and error to get the best results. However, to master this intuitive eating process, as it does take time, a great way to start is to keep track of what you're eating by writing it down or adding it to an app that breaks down your macronutrients and calories. After doing this for a while, you will know what works for your body and what doesn't. Nutrition is not a one-size-fits-all process. What works for me may not work for you. What works for a friend of yours may not work for you. That's why it's important to choose a way of eating that resonates with you. Now, what do I mean by this? You will want to choose a diet not based on the latest fad or what your friends are doing, but one that feels right. This means that you eat foods that make you feel good and that are in alignment with your values. Since we are speaking specifically today about macronutrients, let me start by defining what these are. Macronutrients include protein, carbohydrates, and fats, and are what make up the food we eat that our body requires for fuel. Once ingested, the body breaks down this food into their basic building blocks of amino acids, monosaccharides, and fatty acids. These chemical components are then absorbed in the body and delivered to the cells that support a variety of vital functions. Many different opinions exist on how much of these macronutrients we need for optimal health. I will review the recommended intake for each macronutrient. However, it's important to find the balance that works best for you and your goals. Now, all these recommendations are based on science and all the nutritional research that has been done. So let's start with the first and most important macronutrient, that is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates serve a variety of vital functions and are one of the most important macronutrients. Carbohydrates are the body's preferred source of energy, providing 4 calories per gram, and the only energy source for red blood cells and the brain. Carbohydrates help support digestive health and also manage cholesterol levels. Now, without speaking too much science jargon about chemical structure, yes, I know, snoozer, right? I will explain the various kinds of carbohydrates, which are categorized into monosaccharides, made of carbon and water, and disaccharides, which are made of 2 monosaccharides. The monosaccharides include, number 1, glucose. Glucose is also known as dextrose and is the basic building block of most carbohydrates and is the most predominant sugar found in nature. Next is fructose, or fruit sugar, which is the sweetest sugar or carbohydrate and is found in fruit in varying amounts. The third is galactose, which is as sweet as glucose and often found bound to glucose to form lactose, which we see in milk. Now, the disaccharides include lactose, which is comprised of the link between galactose and glucose and is the prominent sugar in milk, as we discussed already. Maltose, which is comprised of 2 glucose molecules and better known as malt sugar. And sucrose, comprised of glucose and fructose, more commonly known as table sugar. So, of course, this is very sciencey terms of carbohydrates. Most people don't know carbohydrates that way. Unfortunately, though, when people talk about carbohydrates, which is where carbohydrates get their bad name, people mostly think of carbohydrates like candy, baked goods, bread, pasta, and cereal, mostly refined white or whole wheat sources of carbohydrates. Now, refined carbohydrates are usually full of sugar and chemical preservatives, which harm and break down body tissues and organs. However, these are not the kind of carbohydrates that the body requires for fuel. And actually, if we never ate those kind of carbohydrates again, we would be extremely healthy. But what the body does need are healthy carbohydrates that come from pure earth-grown sources. These include foods such as oats, sweet potatoes, whole grains such as brown rice, millet, amaranth, and quinoa, starchy vegetables, and fruit. These healthy carbohydrates not only provide the body with the fuel it needs to move, but also fiber for healthy digestion and keeping cholesterol at healthy levels. Without these foods in the short term, people begin to feel the negative effects such as low energy, brain fog, and crankiness. I'm sure any of you who've ever gone on a no or low carb diet can definitely relate to those. I know I can. In the long term, without these healthy carbohydrates, people do increase their risk of constipation, increased cholesterol, heart disease, and cancer. Unfortunately, many people shy away from eating fruit or other whole food carbohydrate sources. Sometimes they think the sugar content is too high. However, even though there is sugar in these foods, the body knows how to deal with that sugar and uses it as fuel almost immediately. But there's also fiber and a variety of essential micronutrients like vitamins and minerals, which I will review in next week's podcast, that we need for energy, healthy digestion, and optimal health. It's true. Many of the carbohydrates people eat and crave are processed and do cause weight gain and other problems. There's no doubt about that. But unfortunately, thanks to media and fad diets, all carbohydrates have been vilified. Therefore, people do not eat enough of the right kind of carbohydrates, such as whole food complex carbs that are found in our whole grains and vegetables. As a result, fiber intake is at an all-time low, and digestive problems like constipation and colon cancer are now more common than ever. Now you may be thinking, well, how many carbohydrates do I need for optimal health? And that's a great question. So many people are confused by this. Now, according to the Dietary Reference Intake Suggestions, an active individual may require 6 to 10 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. Now, I do stress the kilograms because too often, and I see it in mostly the industry that I'm in, but personal trainers always talk pound of carbs or pound of protein per pound of body weight. And it's just not true. It is per kilogram of body weight. So we think grams and kilograms together. So I'll repeat that. So if you are an active individual and you work out regularly, let's say 3 to 5 to 6 times a week, you will want to support your body and its function with 6 to 10 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. Now, if you are a sedentary person, so that means someone who does less than 30 minutes of activity, less than 3 days per week, this person may only need 1 to 2, maybe 3 grams per kilogram of body weight. And this is where carbohydrates get their bad name. It's not that carbs are bad, it's the type of carbs and its overconsumption or underutilization that's causing the problem. So think of it this way. Carbohydrates are like gas in the tank of your car. You need to have gas in your tank to drive the car, but the amount of gas you need will depend on how much you drive your car. Going on a long drive, you'll need a full tank. Not driving at all or just a short distance, you won't need much gas. The same is true with carbohydrates. If you are an athlete or somebody who trains their body on a regular basis, you will need more energy from carbohydrates than someone who is sick and lying in a bed. In that case, this person who is sick and lying in the bed, as I mentioned, will need minimal carbohydrates, if any at all. But regardless of activity levels, it's recommended that carbohydrates, specifically whole grains and food high in fiber like vegetables and fruits, make up 45 to 65% of your total diet to adequately fuel your body. Of course, this sometimes depends on the resource and your personal goals. Sometimes these numbers will vary. But this is the average. Studies do show that of this carbohydrate intake, 25 to 35 grams of fiber minimum per day is optimal for most adults. And unfortunately, most adults do not get that much fiber. To determine which carbohydrates are the best to consume, many professionals refer to the glycemic index. And this index is a system that assigns a value to foods based on how slowly or how quickly these foods cause increases in blood glucose levels, also known as blood sugar. Blood glucose levels above normal are toxic and can cause blindness, kidney failure, or increases in cardiovascular risk, as what people with diabetes have to deal with. Now, foods low on the glycemic index tend to release glucose slowly and steadily, which is what we want. However, foods high on this scale release glucose rapidly. Low GI, sometimes it's called GI foods, tend to contain higher levels of fiber and support weight loss. While foods high on the GI scale are usually higher in sugar, they do help with energy during or recovery after exercise, or to offset hypoglycemia or low blood sugar levels. Although carbohydrates are the most important macronutrient for your body to function effectively, too much sugar in the body at any one time can be very damaging and lead to such things like diabetes, cancer, and other chronic diseases. Therefore, it's really important to speak to a registered dietitian or certified nutritional professional about the best intake for your personal needs. Of course, if you'd like to learn more about what carbohydrates and other foods to eat to fuel your body for exercise or just basic health, please read my blog at R.J.O.wellness.com, and it's called How to Fuel Intense Workouts with a Plant-Based Diet. Now let's move on to the second macronutrient, the one that everyone thinks is the most important, but it's not. And we'll talk a little bit about why. The body is mostly made up of protein. Yes, protein is our next macronutrient. It is the main structural component of muscle, brain, the nervous system, blood, skin, and hair. This macronutrient serves as a transport mechanism for vitamins, minerals, fat, and oxygen, and is essential for acid-base balance, the building and repair of tissues, hormone and enzyme production, and helps to sustain the energy provided by your carbohydrates. Protein is not a preferred fuel source for the body. However, if it needs to, such as if your body is starving and lacking so many carbohydrates and fats, then it will break down protein for energy as a last resort. But it really doesn't want to. It prefers carbohydrates, then fat, and will use protein if necessary. So the body wants to keep protein more as a repair nutrient. So when people find out that I eat a 100% plant-based diet, the first question they ask is, where do you get your protein? Because unfortunately, we have been taught that protein only comes from animals, but it doesn't. And I used to be so offended by this question because it seems so silly. However, I quickly realized that it was because the majority of people know very little about where protein comes from. Now I love this question because it gives me the chance to educate people on what foods actually do contain protein. So think back to high school biology, if you remember it at all. I'm not sure that I actually do. But do you ever remember learning about plants, how the cells function and what they're made of? It's a very simple concept. Anything with a living cell contains protein or amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. So all living food, plant or animal, contains protein. So some people say, well, what about the starving kids in the world? They are protein deficient. Yes, they are, because they're starving. Anyone who lacks sufficient calories to sustain basic metabolic functions will be protein deficient. But if you eat a well-balanced diet that includes fresh, living fruits and vegetables, it is extremely unlikely you will be protein deficient. If you have ever tried to eat a vegan or plant-based diet and found your energy levels plummet, this is usually because you have not eaten enough food. You've not ingested enough calories in general. It is not because you are low in protein. Think about some of the largest mammals like gorillas, elephants, and the hippo. They are herbivores and they eat nothing but plant foods, maybe a few bugs here and there. Yet they are strong, powerful, and seem to have more than enough protein in their diets. The body can produce most of the protein it needs, which are called non-essential amino acids. However, there are 8 to 10 essential amino acids that cannot be made by the body and need to be consumed in the diet. Protein quality is determined by assessing the amino acid composition, digestibility, and bioavailability, which is how well the amino acid can be used by the body. People often believe that they must consume animal protein to get enough protein, as animal protein is a complete protein, which means you're getting all your essential amino acids. Whereas plant protein is often thought of as not having enough protein or inadequate for protein sources, because many plant-based protein sources are called incomplete proteins, which do not contain all the 8 to 10 essential amino acids. However, there are actually many plant-based complete protein sources. These include soy, quinoa, buckwheat, and sprouts. These are not only easier for the body to digest, but also don't contain saturated fat, which we will talk about later in this podcast, that come from animal products. A well-rounded, whole food plant-based diet will allow for complete proteins to be made by eating a variety of incomplete proteins. There used to be this old belief that a person needed to eat different incomplete proteins, such as grains with nuts or legumes with dairy, or if you're not eating dairy, of course, if you're 100% vegan, you wouldn't do that. But, pairing these things in order to get a complete protein. But this is not true. As long as a variety of these foods are eaten in the diet, the body knows how to put them together to make the complete proteins it requires. Our body is so smart. When it comes to bioavailability, the body's ability to use plant-based protein has been found to be more bioavailable than animal protein. So, for example, dark leafy greens, which most people do not think have any protein in it, or other plant-based sources, are rich in easy-to-digest protein, and about 75% of the amino acids or protein found in these foods are usable by the body. In comparison to meat, where we're looking at only 20 to 25 of the amino acids are usable, and the rest is eliminated as waste or sometimes even sits in the digestive tract to rot. And this is where a lot of the advocates against animal production are coming from, because they're saying, why would we eat a food where so much of its nutrients that we're trying to get are wasted and not even used by the body? It actually doesn't make sense if you look at the science. Now, how much protein does a person actually need? And again, we do not need as much as we think. So according to the Dietary Reference Intake suggestions, the average person requires only about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. And again, per kilogram, not pound. Whereas strength athletes, bodybuilders, those who are trying to build muscle, really only need 1.7 grams of protein, again, per kilogram of body weight. As a percentage breakdown, it's recommended that protein make up about 25% of the total diet. And of course, this will again depend on your resource, your personal goals. All these numbers may vary, but that is the average. Now, I'm really saddened by the fad diets that promote high protein, low carb diets, especially for athletes, because if glycogen stores are depleted, The body will break down muscle protein for fuel, resulting in decreased athletic performance, muscular strength, and endurance. Many of these athletes or active people that I've seen suffer extreme fatigue when they're on these kinds of diets, and in extreme cases, often heart attacks. Okay, this will result because the body is desperately searching for fuel and breaking down any tissue it can find when it's depleted. Now, if you'd like more information on the protein available in plant foods, go ahead and go to my website at R.J.O. Go to my blog and read 21 best sources of plant-based protein. Really great article. Now, this takes us to the third macronutrient, which is fat. Fat provides the body with the most energy of all three macronutrients at 9 calories per gram. Therefore, it's best to consume fat in moderation if weight loss is a goal. However, fat is an important macronutrient that must be part of a healthy, well-balanced diet. Critical functions in the body, such as organ insulation, cell structure, nerve transmission, vitamin absorption, and hormone production, depend on fat. Now let's go through the different kinds of fat. And we're going to start with saturated fatty acids, also called saturated fats. These fats come from animals, as well as some plant sources, including coconut and palm oil, and are solid at room temperature. The most well-known saturated fats, as already mentioned, come from animal products. However, the biggest problem with animal fat is that it's also been shown to increase LDL, or the bad cholesterol, and increase your risk of atherosclerosis, which is clogging of the arteries, and heart disease. To eat animal sources of saturated fat, a person must also cook the meat to kill the harmful bacteria. However, once these fats are heated, they become rancid and harmful to the body and carcinogenic, which is also called cancer-causing. The healthiest kinds of saturated fats come from coconuts as raw coconut meat, coconut butter, or coconut oil. The difference between the saturated fat in animal products and that of coconut is the chemical structure. According to Dr. Mercola, coconut oil is made up of about 2/3 medium-chain fatty acids as opposed to the long-chain fatty acids found in animal saturated fat. Coconut oil is found to be healthy because 50% of the fat content is lauric acid. The body breaks down lauric acid into monolaurin and then uses this compound to destroy viruses such as HIV, herpes, measles, and influenza. So other benefits of coconut oil include immune support, weight loss, heart health, healthy metabolism, energy source, beautiful skin, and supports healthy function of the nervous and endocrine system. I've done some events live at small venues, and I remember this one venue I was at. It was so fun. I said coconut oil should be in 3 places in the home. Number 1, in the kitchen for cooking. Number 2, in your bathroom to rub all over your body because coconut oil is such a beautiful moisturizing oil. And number 3, in the bedroom. And you can probably use your imagination on what I mean by that. But I had a young person put up her hand and say, "Why would you put coconut oil in the bedroom?" So I thought that was just kind of cute. And of course, it made me extremely awkward because I didn't want to answer that question. So I told her to come talk to me after. But if you must cook with coconut oil or with oil, so I'm not a big fan of cooking too much with oil, but if you must cook with oil, coconut oil is, in my opinion, one of the better oils to choose, only because you can get it usually minimally refined and it has a high heat tolerance, which means it's not going to alter its chemical state when you heat it. Now let's move on to the most detrimental fat that's out there, and that is our hydrogenated or trans fats. This type of fat is often used in processed foods such as commercial baked goods, cookies, donuts, muffins, cakes, and pizza doughs, snack foods such as crackers, microwave popcorn and chips, vegetable shortening, fried foods like French fries, fried chicken, chicken nuggets, breaded fish, and candy bars as a preservative to provide a longer shelf life. The problem is that trans fatty acids are toxic to the body and have been shown to raise LDL cholesterol and increase your risk of disease. Now, for optimal health, it is absolutely best to refrain from eating all foods that contain trans fats. Now let's move on to our healthy fats, our unsaturated fats. These fats are broken down into two categories, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. These fats are healthy and are known to support a healthy heart. So let's start with monounsaturated fats. These fats have been shown to increase HDL cholesterol, which is considered the good cholesterol, and can be found in foods like olives, olive oil, peanuts and peanut oil, sesame oil, avocados, cacao beans, almonds, pecans, cashews, macadamia nuts, and hazelnuts. Many, many nuts and seeds contain monounsaturated fats. Now, polyunsaturated fats have been shown by the American Heart Association to be beneficial for the heart when eaten in moderation and used to replace saturated fat in the diet. These fats are most dominant in walnuts, sunflower, sesame, pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, hemp, and tofu. Now, essential fatty acids, which are our omega fatty acids, are a type of polyunsaturated fat that need to be consumed in the diet because the body is not able to make them. Omega fatty acids are essential fatty acids that include omega-3, 6, 7, and 9. They must be consumed in the diet and provide numerous health benefits to the body. Now, if you want to learn more about these omega fatty acids, I will be doing a podcast on them, but you can also go read my blog at my website, R.J.O. And this blog is called Why a Plant-Based Omega Blend is Better for You. I review all the different omegas and where all these foods come from that will provide you with the richest sources of omega. So go ahead and check that out. Now, over the years, fat has been vilified by weight loss industries. Therefore, food companies have done their best to provide food with reduced fat. However, food companies that boast fat-free products often just replace fat with refined sugar, which causes more harm than good, and of course, in the long run, causes more weight gain. Now, according to the Dietary Reference Intake Suggestions, an individual may require about 0.2 to 0.4 grams of fat per kilogram of body weight. And total intake should be less than 30% of the diet. Now, a lot of sources, you're going to see a lot of different opinions on how much fat. I personally do not eat 30% of my diet. I probably, if I had to guess, I'm about 5 to 10% of my diet in fat, only because I find that my body doesn't run very well when my fat intake is high. So again, these recommendations are just recommendations. And remember, your personal goals are really important. And of course, your own individual body's needs are going to really make the difference here. Now, despite the great need for fat to achieve optimal body function and health, people continue to strive towards achieving low levels of body fat in the name of vanity. Yes, too much fat isn't good on the body either. Of course, it'll cause a variety of health problems. The diet still must contain a certain amount of healthy fat to provide the body with energy, protection, and optimal health. So it's really important to not get too caught up in these numbers. Trying not to make your diet so perfect that you're actually chained to these numbers. Now, don't get me wrong. If you are an athlete or looking to completely sculpt your physique, then yes, your diet's going to need to have a little bit more math, according to crunching the numbers for the macronutrients to make sure things are right on par. But I would definitely suggest that, if you're just looking for a healthy body, a lot of wellness, just feeling good, break yourself free from the counting chains. You don't need to track the macronutrients per se. You don't need to track your calories. Just make sure that you're eating a well-balanced diet. It's really clear to see that based on science, though, all three macronutrients are important and they need to be included in a well-balanced diet. So remember, carbohydrates and fat are the body's preferred fuel source of energy, whereas protein is mostly used in building, recovery, and repair of tissues. So your carbs and fat are technically, your carbohydrates being the most important as far as energy, fat for sure, and then protein. If you're an active person, of course, your protein is important because you're going to want to have a lot of protein for recovery and repair. But keep in mind, your number one important fuel source is carbohydrates of the right whole food source. Now, of course, to achieve optimal health, it's important to eat a diet that is well balanced in all 3 macronutrients. So go back and look at the numbers. Connect to a healthcare professional, dietitian, nutrition coach to discuss what this balance best looks like for you and your goals. I'm, of course, happy to chat with you and help you learn about these, but mostly I would love to help you learn how to eat intuitively. Break the chains from counting calories and macronutrients and learn to love food for its nourishing properties rather than use it as a crutch for emotional support. So if you'd like to connect with me, please visit my website at R.J.O.wellness.com. So today's topic was all about your macronutrients, how many you need, and that they are our main fuel source. So like the gas in your gas tank in the car, your macronutrients, your carbs, your protein, and fats are important to be included in your diet. Tune in next week where we will discuss the micronutrients. You will learn what they are, where they come from, and why, in my opinion, we should be focusing more on micronutrients because they are absolutely important for optimal health. Until next time, my friends, keep rockin' your wellness. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Rockin Wellness Podcast. Make sure to visit my website at www.rjowellness.com where you can subscribe to the show and check out all the show notes. While you're at it, if you found value in this podcast, if you'd simply tell a friend about it, that would help out too. You may choose to join the R.J.O. Wellness community to take advantage of the freebies, courses, and coaching that will take your voyage to the next level, or support this podcast with your monthly membership. Until next time, my friends, keep rocking your wellness.